Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here and welcome to my guide to Cloud of Darkness on the Chaotic difficulty. This is effectively an Extreme/Savage level 24 player boss using good old World of Darkness's final boss. This encounter has its own set of loot, including item level 730 armor, mounts, a minion, and a hairstyle. We'll talk more about the loot in the end of the video. This fight is broken up into several phases and several responsibilities depending on your position within those phases. Please use the timestamps in the description to find what you need. At the start of the fight, there are a ton of positions to assign. For Phase 1, you'll just need Alliance A to go west, B to stay middle, and C to go east, then split into light parties. These assignments should be enough for newer groups. For Phase 2, we'll talk about it when we get there. At the start of the fight, make sure at least one tank in each alliance has aggro. The boss will do Blade of Darkness pretty much right away. This attack does one of three things. If she holds both of her arms in front of her, it does a large point-blank AoE. If she raises one of her arms, then the opposite arm will have a safe donut right next to it. Basically get to the arm that's closer to the ground. Once she does two Blades of Darkness, she will cast Flood of Darkness, doing a raid-wide plus bleed on every player, while also changing the arena and starting her first phase. Make sure to have percentage mid on this to reduce the bleed. After the phase begins, Cloud of Darkness will begin firing 11 attacks at the top aggro in each alliance, inflicting them with lightning resistance down. Every few autos, the tanks in each alliance should swap to ensure that tanks aren't overwhelmed by the damage, though you could also try to go for a new record. After a few autos, she will cast Grim Embrace twice back to back. Each time she casts it, she will tether 12 players and give them a Deadly Embrace debuff. When this debuff expires, a hand will pop out of the player and attempt to give them the deadliest high five of their life, giving a player a stack of damage down and a 5-second doom that, if not cleansed, will end you. The hand will either lunge out in the direction the player is facing or behind the player. This is determined by Cloud of Darkness's animation during Grim Embrace, which either has her pulling the crystal towards her or pushing it away from her. You'll either need to backstep out of the AoE as it appears in front of you or run forward to get out of the AoE as it appears behind you. Her gripping behind the crystal means back up to be safe later. Her pushing into the crystal means move forward later. We had an alliance chat macro that said things like 1B 2F or 1F 2B. What's important is you remember which of the two grips you're affected by. Echo macros or mental reminders work wonders. When your debuff is about to wear off, try to aim the hand outside of the arena as best as possible, or at least as far away from the rest of the group as possible. Then simply take a small step back or a small step forward when the debuff hits 0 and you'll be good. Legacy players might have tighter timing for this if they need to back up, though they do have plenty of options like locking on to help assist. If you're uncomfortable, you can also go to the very back of the room and gap close as soon as the debuff disappears, and you should dodge it regardless of which hand it is. That is assuming your teammates didn't also drop one directly in front of you. While your debuffs are resolving, Cloud of Darkness will do one of two mechanic patterns relative to what timers she assigned on everyone with Grim Embrace. First up, she will summon several Cloudlets along the back edges of the room. They will do 4 sets of line AoEs, all of which you just need to dodge. Just look at the back of the room, align yourself to be just outside the first 2 line AoEs, and then step into them as they appear. After the second movement, you'll be safe until all 4 of the lines are done. However, during the Cloudlet AoEs, Cloud of Darkness will also begin casting one of 3 spells: Death, Aero, or Flare. Death will pull players towards the center of the platform before an AoE goes off and inflicts doom on any hit. Right after the center AoE goes off, it becomes a donut, so players should step in right after that initial AoE goes off. Aero hits the center of the platform with a powerful AoE, likely killing anyone hit. This also knocks players back, so they should line up with the same spots you used for Death, those 3 far corners, and get knocked back into them. Knockback resist does work on both Aero and Death, but I would not recommend using it on this first set here. Save it for later. The final option is Flare, which gives one player from each alliance a Flare marker. These hit incredibly hard, so you may think they're a joke like other fights. They aren't. Ensure you have a lot of MIT and that those 3 players are very far away from the party and each other. Alliance A's Flare should head to the left side of the platform, B towards the back, and C towards the right. After the flare goes off, each alliance will get 2 light party stack markers, so split into light parties like we assigned earlier. Alliance A's light parties lean left, B back or middle, and C's to the right. Right after the flare will be a Blade of Darkness, so respond accordingly. Grim Embrace debuffs will begin resolving after this, so it's up to every individual player to remember theirs and do it correctly. If you're someone with an Asuna, be ready, just in case. Cloud of Darkness will also cast either Endeath or Enaero. This makes it so the next time that she does Blade of Darkness, she will also perform Death or Aero immediately after. A member of the Alliance posting a macro for this for everyone to remember helps plenty, but she does leave a text box in your chat that will tell you which one she's doing, either Wind Abide in my breast or Death Abide in my breast, so you can use those as reminders as well. At this point, if you're getting tons of back-to-back debuff timers expiring, after 3 sets, she will cast Break. This summons 2 eyes along the outer edges and petrifies any player looking at Cloud of Darkness or the eyes when the cast bar finishes. Just look away from all of them any way possible and you're good. If just one debuff set goes off, then Cloud of Darkness will use Rapid Sequence Particle Beam. This targets each alliance with an 8-player split damage line AoE that hits 4 times back to back. It's also what we like to call a wild charge, dealing significantly more damage to the first 2 players it hits in each alliance. So Alliance A to the left, B middle, C right, and make sure that the tanks stand in front of the rest of the alliance. Also, ensure there's decent mid here. Regardless of which pattern you get, the rest of the phase plays out similarly, just with slightly different timings. The Break pattern has Blade of Darkness right after Break, which then sets off the Enaero or Endeath. The Rapid Sequence pattern summons a second set of Cloudlets and then begins casting Blade of Darkness while they're still going off, which then sets off Enaero or Endeath. This timing is usually harder, so I highly recommend using your knockback resist for the end spell execution. Just ensure that if it's Death, you know to still step into the donut after the middle explodes. And if it's Aero, do not run to the center of the room and get killed by the initial hit. As the final debuffs and Cloudlets are resolving, there will be one more Aero, Death, or Flare. Aero and Death are the same here, but Flare is just going to be the 3 flare markers, none of that light party stuff from earlier. Finish handling your hand debuffs and you are all set. You'll be hit by Flood of Darkness for raid-wide damage and the phase will end. Keep in mind that this phase actually repeats at the end of the fight, doing whichever pattern you didn't experience here. So by learning this first phase, you've really learned over half the fight already. After Flood of Darkness, Cloud of Darkness immediately begins casting Deluge of Darkness to change the arena shape again. This attack also inflicts a bleed, so ensure that there's a good amount of percentage mid on it. Once in this phase, every tank should try to have aggro on Cloud of Darkness. Just toss a Provoke her way at some point. While Cloud of Darkness will auto-attack the 4 tanks in the middle platforms, if any of them dies, then the outside tanks taking double autos is better than one of the DPS or healers randomly getting attacked. As for position assignments, this is where most of the fight's difficulty comes. Given this is still an early guide, I don't think anyone completely agrees, but I'll do my best to explain the logic behind everything and of course provide you with diagrams. So this image accurately assigns every player from every alliance a position. It ensures there's healers in range of everyone in their own alliances across the entirety of the phase, so long as everyone stays alive, and allows for easy assignments and movement across both the outside platforms and PvP tiles in the middle. I'd like to take special note of the 6 players on the outer platforms that are closer to the middle of the room. Later on, positions are going to get swapped between a lot of players, but these 6 players ideally never have to do PvP tiles. This is because of how the Looming Chaos swaps work, only swapping 6 players on the inside with the 6 furthest from them and 3 on each outer platform. If you have a player who is struggling with PvP tiles or you're carrying a first timer for bonus, considering adjusting positions to give them one of these 6 spots, as it means they'll only ever have to do the outside platforms. As for the players on those outer platforms, we had this image to showcase their relative positions for all of their mechanics. All positions are done relative to the outside of the room, which is why this image is turned to treat that as our quote north. Not much to say about these. They assign positions for line AoE spreads, pair partners, and tower assignments. Keep them up on a second monitor or on your phone or something if it helps. While Deluge of Darkness is casting, be sure to start getting into position based on that diagram. Melees who are staying on the outer platforms can stay close to Cloud of Darkness and then move to their respective sides using the outer rings afterwards if they want. Once Deluge of Darkness finishes, only players on the center tiles will be able to hurt the Cloud of Darkness directly. Players on the outer platforms will instead have 2 Stygians of Darkness to hit. Fortunately, all damage done to the Stygians is inflicted to Cloud of Darkness at the end of the phase. All center tiles can also only support one player at a time. If two players step into a tile, it will instantly break and drop them to their death. You may also not stand on the same tile for longer than about 43 seconds or it will break. Be sure to refresh tiles regularly between each major mechanic and to keep an eye on your allies doing their resets as well. I'd like to take special note that if you are resurrected during your 5-second res invuln, your weight on a platform is 0. So as long as you don't sprint or take any actions, you have 5 seconds to get back to a spot where you belong. The outer platform players also have to occasionally cull the 4 Atomos that spawn in the intercardinal positions. These will tether to players shortly after spawning and deal massive damage over time to them. They will also eventually begin healing the Cloud of Darkness herself, so have ranged pick them off with a few GCDs whenever they respawn. The Atomos also leave behind a puddle that, when stepped in, will cause the player to teleport to the telegraph's location after 6 seconds. This can be used by the players on the inside if they die and are resurrected on the outer platforms in order to return to the middle, or to fix any sort of wonky things that happen in this fight. But honestly, it requires a lot of personal accountability and fight knowledge to do safely. Players on the outer ring should avoid these puddles while doing any mechanics that requires going near them, or at the very least ensure that they stay on the outside of the platform if they get the teleport with the telegraph. Shortly into the phase, Cloud of Darkness will cast Dark Dominion, doing heavy raid-wide damage and changing the outer ring into a danger space, inflicting a very potent bleed on anyone who steps in it. Ensure players are healthy after the phase change and the bleed ticks have hit them. The tanks on the outer platform should position the Stygians like in the diagram I showed earlier and like on the screen right now. Both Stygians will do Third Art of Darkness. This has 2 half-platform AoEs and either align AoE spread or pair partners. The half rooms are designated by just one of her tentacles lighting up, the pair partners if both of them light up, and the line spread if it's just her body that lights up. While the half platforms and line spreads are easy enough to understand, it's important to note that the pair partners are proximity baited. The 3 closest players will each bait a paired AoE, hence why the diagram has the layout that it has. Ensure that if you're not the baiter, that you're just a few steps back from that person. Otherwise, you'll double up, or even worse, outrange the person who's baiting it. It's also worth mentioning that Super Mitt can allow players to survive these alone, so long as they don't double up. Tanks can also eat one alone if they pop a bunch of Mitt or their tank invuln. Try to do it like normal, don't rely on these things, but also feel free to take extra precautions. I know I do. Right after Third Art of Darkness resolves is Particle Concentration. This summons towers that requires players inside of them both on the outer platforms and the PvP tiles. For the outer platforms, just follow the diagram to match 3 players into each tower. For the inner platforms, there's a bit more nuance. Have all 3 players stand in a small triangle, with 2 players closer to the cardinals and 1 player in the middle tile. One of the outer players will basically begin in a tile that works and can just stay there. The corner tile takes the outermost tower position, and the remaining player fills in. This movement is simple, but just make sure not to assassinate each other. If any tower is missed, the entire 24 players will be hit with a raid wide. This inflicts some damage and gives a stacking vulnerability up. If just one goes off, it's not that big of a deal. Any more than that, and it starts to get rougher and rougher. If it looks like towers will be missed, consider Tank LBing before the hit, and I'll make special note of a part of this that we're going to use Tank LB for potentially later. Once this is done, you'll get a small reprieve with a bunch of auto attacks before Cloud of Darkness does Ghastly Gloom. This will either do a donut AoE or a cross AoE that hits everywhere, so both the tiles and outer platforms need to respect either pattern. The donut just has the tile players step into her hitbox, and the platform players just get really close to the center edge of the platform. This is designated by the clouds around her, making sort of a ring around her hitbox. For the cross AoE, it just looks like a bunch of clouds surrounding her, and the tile players will have exactly 3 safe spaces per corner. It's safest to have 1 player claim an outside square before the mechanic even begins, and then have a movement prio for the other 2. The quicker you can get those 2 players into the corners just gives more time for the 3rd player, so the better you get at this, the faster this movement will be. For the outer platforms, they just run next to the Atomos circles along the outer ring, which is now freed up from Dark Dominion. Once this is resolved, the Atomos will respawn and the Stygians will cast Curse of Darkness. This places several different timed debuffs on the outer platform players. When these expire, that player fires a conal AoE in the direction they are looking, damaging and placing a dot on any player in its path. Keep track of your timers and look towards the outer ring when it's about to expire. In fact, one of them will expire almost immediately after you get these debuffs, so be sure to check. Right after these go off is Evil Seed. This places 8 seed markers over players around the room. 2 players on each of the outer platform will get one, and 4 of the tile players will get them, but no more than 2 in each corner. This diagram shows the end position of each seed placement. The outer players have a nice easy time just placing them along the edge. The inner players need to be careful about letting seed players get through to the east and west inner positions. If you get 2 seeds in one corner, it's best to let the east or westmost player go first and get to the further position, and the second player follows behind them and gets to the closer one. Once the AoEs appear, the 2 players should sprint back to their platforms in the same corner. Make sure if you're the further player that you don't run too fast and kill the person in front of you. And if you're the person who's doing less movement, then get out of the way. Keep in mind, any platform where a seed is placed counts as having a player on that platform. It's very important that the seeds are not on any platform except for the 4 that are designated in the diagram, or it eliminates movement options and almost ensures that you're going to have problems later. This will immediately be followed by Ghastly Gloom, whichever one you didn't do first. So if you did Donut first, then it'll be Cross second and vice versa. Right after this goes off, another set of curses will expire, so check your timer and aim outward. Now for the Brambles. When the Stygian Shadows begin casting Thorny Vine, you'll want 8 designated players standing as close as possible to the Vine AoEs. This will mark them as the tether target for that respective Vine. Once they receive the Vine debuff itself and are tethered to it, they can sprint and run away from it to break it. We have all 8 of the vines handled by outer platform players as seen in this diagram. Run opposite and along the outer ring for a snappier break. The inner tile players aren't free though. There will be 2 sets of 2 players tethered to each other, one on the north side of the tiles and the other on the south. They'll need to start as close as possible and then run across the tiles until the vine breaks. As Thorny Vine is casting, have all 3 players that are in a corner huddle close together. If 2 of you get targeted, stay close until the tether forms, then have the player in the farther tile begin running across. There's a chance that a player needs to shift over to let another player pass by here, so be ready to move over the tile that's half covered in a bramble to make room. If there are no brambles in your corner, have a player shift over to the half-covered bramble tile to leave the center tile open. The player breaking the tether will be coming from the other corner and can use the extra space. It should break before that point, but there's no reason not to give them that extra room. Be sure to have any tile timers reset done well before the movement needs to occur. One final note, during the bramble tethers, each Stygian will also begin casting an interruptible Flood of Darkness, which just does massive damage and inflicts a bleed to the raid. Make sure to interrupt this, whether it be the tank who's literally just standing there doing nothing except hitting the Stygian, or if is ranged as they're running away from the tether. Once all of that is done, reset to your default positions. Cloud of Darkness will begin gathering magical energies to prepare for her next attack, which doesn't have a cast bar, mind you. The attack itself is determined by what color she glows. If she glows purple, she will fire 2 sets of 12 spread AoEs. If she glows red, she will do a split damage line AoE on 6 different players. The spreads will always hit 12 times, twice in a row. So if you have even a single dead player, then it's gonna double up on somebody. Tanks, if you see people are dead, consider just popping your invuln here. If all 6 tanks pop their invuln and you get lucky and one of them gets doubled up on, then you will have no additional deaths. And you really don't need the invuln for anything else. For the beams, you'll want to ensure that all 6 tanks are closest to the boss, as these are also wild charges, and any other players part of the stack are nearby behind them. This will target 1 player on each of the outer platforms and 1 player in each of the 4 corners. Ensure that you are all close enough to actually be hit and throw out mitigation. With 3 or more people, it doesn't hit so hard, but it's survivable with 2 players so long as they have mit. For the players on the tiles, If you need to get together for the wild charge, you should have 2 people on the back corner ones in the cubbies, and the tank should actually try to get pretty close to them next to that exact same spot. If you have the tank at the front of the platform, there's a chance that maybe it doesn't clip all 3 people. Like I said, you could survive with 2, but you really don't want to. Just having everyone huddled as close to the little hockey puck that blocks your movement a little bit just is a safer thing to do. Right after either spread or beams, Cloud of Darkness will begin casting Active Pivot Particle Beam. This will do a line AoE in front and behind her that rotates with each blast, totaling a 90-degree turn. For the players on the outside, they'll have to dodge an AoE from the Stygian before they begin dodging the rotation. The Stygian will either do Core Lateral Phaser or Lateral Core Phaser. Core Lateral means stand in front of her first, then get to her sides, and Lateral Core Phaser would be side safe first and center second. The name is basically telling you where the safe spots are in what order. After this, the outside party can get behind the laser rotation. Bear in mind the final Curse of Darkness timers will go off right after the rotation finishes, and Atomos will also respawn at this timing too. It is essential that these Atomos die before the next mechanic, or players are going to start getting fried. There's also a tank buster from each Stygian on their main aggro target. It's AoE, so tank mitigate and make sure they're not too close to anyone else. For the inside people, they'll have to navigate the tiles without killing each other. I recommend 2 players in the cubbies and the corners reset their timers once the beams or spreads go off. 2 corners on the inside will remain safe through the entire rotation, so if the rotation is safely going away from you, just stay put. The other 4 players should line up as you see us doing here. The player closest to the rotations can get halfway into the first east or west tile, so they are snugly behind, and then move up as the rotation goes away, usually about 2 tiles total. Everyone behind them must wait until the person in front of them steps forward before moving, so don't take your sweet time. As soon as the person in front of you goes, you go. Once the rotation finishes, the back of the line should return to their initial corner, have the corner tiles reset their timers, and simply wait. Next up is Looming Chaos, which does damage to the raid and swaps everyone's position with another player's. The 3 farthest players on the outside will be swapped with 3 players on the opposite side of the room within the tile section. So the westmost players in the room will be swapped with one of the east side tile groups, for example. We tried testing baiting this to be completely opposite, but found that the results were not 100% consistent. All of the remaining players are just swapped with the other players doing the same platform. So the 6 remaining outside players just swap sides with each other, and the 6 remaining inside players just swap places with each other, staying outside and inside respectively. That's why I mentioned at the start of the video, those 6 ranged positions would basically never have to do tiles, is because they are closest to the middle of the room and will just swap with each other. It's worth noting that Looming Chaos does also reset aggro, so every tank should immediately provoke the Cloud of Darkness middle to ensure they are in the top 6 like at the start of the phase. With that, the fight's kind of on repeat with 1 or 2 new things. First up is Curse of Darkness, which will apply debuffs to the outer players again. These ones are much more spread out timer-wise, as the first detonation doesn't happen for almost 30 seconds, but keep an eye on those timers and I'll give you reminders. Next is Towers again. This is largely the same, except that the Stygians will just do Core Lateral or Lateral Core Phasers instead of Third Art of Darkness, which makes it a little bit easier. Dodge these and then get into the towers using the diagrams. Then remember to aim the curses away right after this. I highly advise having a tank close to the center of the room. Be ready to tank LB3 these towers to survive. Heck, if you don't have LB3, do an LB of some kind, because often in pugs you're going to have 1 or more failed towers here. If Looming Chaos's swaps didn't go properly because people were dead, then just all sorts of things can go wrong, but it is recoverable if you have the tank LB3 preventing even more deaths. The only other real concern is that the tank LB3 range is 50 yalms, and the arena is much bigger than that. So you really want as many players close to the middle of the room as you can possibly get, and the tanks that are doing it to be in a position that's closest to the rest of their alliance. So, a little bit of a pain, but hey, if it lets you prog, then it's the right decision to make. Next is Dark Dominion again, so make sure you heal and mitt because you just took all the damage from the potentially failed towers, and then reposition the Stygian so it's centered in the outer platform. It's a good idea to visually get into your pairs for the upcoming Third Art of Darkness just in case anyone is confused or isn't thinking about it or just straight up forgot. Do Third Art of Darkness for the outside players while the inside players do something a little new. Players on the inside will instead contend with Feint Particle Beam, targeting one player in each inside corner with an AoE that will rapidly chase them when it finishes casting. This follows pretty fast, so whichever player in the corner gets it needs to immediately start rotating around the arena clockwise as soon as they're marked. Don't wait for it to finish casting. Go, go, go. Any players not targeted by a chaser need to quickly get into the corner cubbies to allow the rotating players to pass through without any collisions. As for how much you rotate, we do what we call the Monopoly Run, where you actually just do an entire lap around the arena, ending up back at the corner that you started with. The rotating AoE will give up long before this, but it just keeps your positioning consistent, especially if you happen to get a wild charge beam coming up later. Also, if you're a tank and you held onto your tank invulnerability up to this point, you can choose to just eat it with the damage down. So you could just sit there in your invuln and take 16 blasts to the face. I don't recommend it, but if you notice that you've become the target because somebody else died, then it's something that can straight up save the run. So it's another place where tank invuln should be considered. Atomos will then respawn and a Curse of Darkness will expire, so check those timers. There will also be a cross or donut AoE again, so ensure the inside players have 3 to a corner just in case it's cross and dodge accordingly. Then it's another lateral core or core lateral before magical energies. This is the spread or wild charge beam from earlier, and Cloud of Darkness will do whichever one she didn't do the first time, so spread or line up accordingly. After this, each Stygian needs to be interrupted to prevent Flood of Darkness again, and at this point the phase is basically over. There will be one more timer that goes off before this phase ends, so one last time, check your curses and look outward. Seen this one blast people at the very final bit. Then Cloud of Darkness will cast Flood of Darkness and reset the arena to normal, doing raid-wide damage, and the Stygians' missing health will be deducted from the boss's health bar as they disappear. Cloud of Darkness immediately goes to the wall and repeats Deluge of Darkness, returning the fight to phase 1. The only difference again is the repeat of the phase will be the opposite pattern to whichever one you had first. So if you had Break Pattern first, this one will do those Alliance Wild Charges and vice versa. Finish her off and you're all set. For loot, each Alliance will receive their own loot. At minimum, there will be 2 armor coffers in each chest, but items such as the Shroud of Darkness mount or the hairstyle can drop. These items are only rolled between the 8 players in your party, not all 24, so you could theoretically have 3 of any of them in a single run. Each player will also receive 2 Cloud Dark Demi-Materia 1 and 1 Cloud Dark Demi-Materia 2 by default. Demi 1s can be used to buy the armor and the Shroud of Darkness mount, while Demi 2s can be used to buy the Days of Darkness mount and the hairstyle. You can also receive bonus Demi-Materia. During random times throughout the day or week, the fight can actually have a limited time bonus, noted by a small treasure chest in the high-end Duty Finder. This causes 8 additional Demi-Materia 1s to drop when each individual Alliance chest is opened, and these 8 Demi-Materias are distributed randomly across the various players. I'm not sure if there's a set rule for it, but we've seen people make out like bandits with tons of extras, and we've seen people not get them at all, so you just have to kind of hope you're one of the people who gets the bonus Demi-Materia. Players with first-time bonus will also cause everyone in the raid to receive 2 bonus Demi 2s per person. So in my first clear, which had 24 first-timers, we received 49 Demi-Materia 2s, 1 for the clear and then 48 bonus for the 24 people. Getting and teaching new players will help expedite getting these a lot, so don't be afraid if you're brand new to this to try to get in on it. And as a reminder, there is no loot lockout here, so run it to your heart's content. Get all the armor, the mounts, whatever reason you have for running it, you can just go nuts. And that is going to be a wrap for my guide to the chaotic Cloud of Darkness. Keep in mind that depending on which data center you're playing on, I can't guarantee that everything you see here is exactly as each data center will run it, but this is what our group has been doing, and it seems like a lot of other groups have been doing something very, very similar. On top of that, please bear in mind that the bonus times can change per data center, so you may want to hop around the data centers you're playing on, and that there are also plenty of Discord, such as the, really actually difficult Alliance Raid Discord in NA, as well as I'm sure a bunch of others across the different data centers as well. So look for whatever resources you need to find groups for it, and best of luck. Anyway, thanks for watching. I will see you all in the next one, and until then, take care.